nature of anxiety and what is it that is going on with it. And what we observed is that there are a number of aspects regarding this, and specifically, there are certain characteristics of what happens. We begin, for example, as we saw, to regard potential with certainty. We noted that we focus on the future exclusively, and all of us recognize that these are elements that are beyond our control. Anxiety has a tendency, thirdly, to exaggerate fears unreasonably. Number 4, it ignores divine promises. And number 5, it is driven by circumstances. Well, I want to move on this morning and begin by noting number 3, its cost. There's a lot that is going on with anxiety, and there's a lot that the effects of it on our lives and on our relationships. And I think for us to recognize the importance of eliminating anxiety, we have to realize that this really is a big deal. It's a problem for us to continue on in this kind of a state because it does affect things. And so many times we think, well, it's just affecting me. And that's unfortunately not true. But there are a number of factors, I think, that we need to explore that give us some pictures and a little bit of an understanding about the cost of anxiety. Number 1, the rational becomes irrational. The rational becomes irrational. What begins to happen is that our minds get flooded with things. And whenever our minds get flooded with things, we kind of reach the point where the processor is no longer processing. Things that we might try to rationalize through this. I've talked just a little bit, and I've used this term flooded. I've mentioned this in some other messages as well, but there was some studies that were done, and it was actually in the context of families, marriages, husbands and wives in particular, and the relationships that existed there. And there were a lot of medical studies. There's a number of different aspects that they studied, but what they realized was that there reached a point in a discussion, an argument, something like that, when individuals would all of a sudden basically be unable to process anything else. And there were a lot of physical reactions. Blood pressure went high. In some cases, hands began to sweat. There was a feeling essentially of being absolutely overwhelmed in everything. And the realities were that these individuals all of a sudden began to feel all of this anxiety, and it reached the point when they were no longer capable of processing anything. And the research suggested that it would take anywhere from 20 to 25 minutes for the emotions and everything physical to settle down to where that individual was able to then process things. Maybe you've seen that, maybe you've experienced it personally. In that process, if you've been there, you'll relate well to what I'm saying. You're not able to just focus and be rational. If you've not been that person, but have been trying to rationalize with someone who is there, you'll understand another perspective. I'm beating my head against a wall right now. Okay? And sometimes, people have said, well, this just isn't the time to talk about it. And just kind of take a 30-minute cool down period. Okay? Well, that's in essence what's going on. When we become so focused on anxiety, all of a sudden our perspective on everything becomes very quickly distorted. And even though we may be able to dismiss a particular fear as though it is irrational, in that moment, it is as rational as can be. And we cannot get our minds to reprogram and think, okay, what I'm thinking is irrational. Now, I'll say this, I think that one of the keys in going through this, and I don't necessarily have the answers to say, okay, well, if you're experiencing this, take these 3 simple steps. I do not necessarily have that answer. I think there are a couple of things that you can do. One of these things is going to sound absolutely ridiculous, but I'm telling you, slow your breathing down. Take deep breaths, okay? And do so for 2 to 3 minutes. Just a conscious inhale and a conscious exhale. Because it will naturally, physically reduce a lot of things in your body. Pray is another aspect, okay? And try to get that perspective lined back up. Maybe you've had a near accident or something, and you've stopped and you're shaking and all of this. And and you just say, I just need a minute. I just need to take a deep breath, okay? Well, those deep breaths may need to be spread out over a 2 to 3 minute time frame, for example. But I think physically that is something that can very, very much help you try to focus on this. There's a second element to the cost. Not only does the rational become irrational, but number 2, it limits ministry potential. When we're full of anxiety, we're going to struggle to be able to minister to others. We're often going to become so focused on what it is that we're battling and the various emotions that we are feeling that in many cases we are simply going to be unable to respond to anything except what it is that we are facing. And in doing so, unfortunately, our ability to be able to minister to others becomes lost. If you're struggling, and I'm sure, been there, maybe you're struggling with something major, nobody knows about it, and then you hear someone else struggling with something minor in your mind. And it's like, you ain't got nothing. Wait a minute. We've got to be mindful of the mindset and the realities that we do have an opportunity to minister. Third element of the cost to this is that it hinders relationships. Satan loves to get us isolated. If you go back and look in Genesis chapter 3, that was exactly what happened with Adam and Eve, though Adam seems to have joined the scene certainly later on. At what point, we do not know, but it begins seemingly with Adam being somewhere else. We do not know where. If you look at any of the National Geographic type discovery shows where it's a predator, an animal seeking its prey, what happens? Well, it's looking for the one that's isolated from the rest of the herd. And Satan wants you to be isolated. He wants you to be isolated socially. He wants you to be isolated spiritually. And in doing so, in many ways, we become easy prey. Let's phrase it that way. God did not design us to be creatures that are isolated and independent of each other. God designed us instead to be creatures that depend upon one another, that need relationships. But you have to have relationships that are healthy. To be involved in toxic relationships does not help anything. But if you are filled with anxiety, you will quickly discover that you are going to isolate yourself and hinder relationships with others and your relationship with God. We might make a rather logical statement and just say it this way: trust and anxiety are incompatible. I cannot be anxiously trusting. Okay? I'm trusting or I'm not. I'm anxious or I'm trusting. It's one or the other. But you cannot be doing both. They are mutually incompatible. When I become so focused on me and my problems, and I allow the anxiety to then begin to overwhelm me, often I become self-reliant then. It's up to me to fix the problem. I think this is one of the reasons that even in this context, we're given the instruction to stop being careful, stop being anxious, and be praying. It takes the dependence, the reliance off of me, and it places it on God where it needs to be. There's a fourth dimension to this cost, and that is that it hinders our physical well-being. Let's just be honest. If you are worried to death, you might achieve just that. It is not healthy to stay in that zone, so to speak. Physically, there's a lot that is going on. Stress has the tendency to do this. I've not figured out the answer for this. I know the feeling of it, and I know what at some point in time has to give. Now, I know everyone's solution is, well, you just need to, relax. Okay, I didn't think of that one. I'd like to, okay? But at times, the demands are so overwhelming that it is very difficult to relax. Tell a college student who is in the midst of final exams, just relax. That's easier said than done. There's a lot that's going on physically. The heart is beating harder. The blood vessels are constricted. You've got all of the adrenaline. You've got all of these things going on physically. It is not a healthy state to remain in. I don't think that it's the state in which God intends for us to remain either. It is, if I'm full of anxiety, there's a lot that's going on physically, but there's a lot that is going on emotionally. To be honest, we can reach a point where we have become crippled and defeated emotionally. It's as though we can't put one foot in front of the other. And this is what we've talked about even with the extent of depression and so forth. At some point in time, the natural response to that is to look for some sort of an outlet. We have to be very careful because we may end up looking for whatever to produce whatever relief. And if this over here is going to provide me with the relief from this here, I'll seek this all day long. Now, if this relief is an ungodly practice, then it's providing me some relief, but it's also complicating things because of the conviction and everything else that's going on. But Satan will quickly point to the relief that comes from this. And think about the destructive habits to our lives and the destructive relationships that we have engaged in just to experience some sort of relief, just to numb the pain or deaden the pain. Look at all of the substance abuse and everything that takes place just to try to escape reality. What is happening is that we have allowed ourselves to become so crippled emotionally that we have sought other opportunities that may be destructive, that may be harmful, just to try to get the relief from all of this. Now, God, as I shared earlier, I believe does not want us to be in this state here, but we have to settle it God's way, otherwise we just simply complicate the problem. So we saw number one that we have to eliminate anxiety, but let's move on and note number two, we have to embrace prayer. This is how we have to learn to solve things. Now, We are a society that likes instant everything, instant gratification. I had instant oatmeal. It wasn't quite instant. It still took a while. But instant everything. Instant coffee. Instant this. I remember when my family got the first microwave. Our first microwave, not the first microwave, but our first one. And I would even hate to guess how much that monster cost back in the day. But I'm sure it was a lot. And I'm sure it was a lot on the power bill. I can still picture it, a dark brown, big old monster of a thing, and the power, you have to turn that thing on, the lights would almost start to dim. It was something, okay? And we were shocked at how quickly you could heat up and cook things and defrost things and over defrost things and begin cooking accidentally in a microwave. It's amazing how young people have learned that you might take a macaroni cup, for example, and never put water in it, but put it in the microwave, and it can become as black can be in just a very short time. We want instant everything, and typically we want instant fix. And this is where it starts to get hard for us. I was recently listening to, what was I doing? I was listening to a counseling session. That's what I was doing, and I had to analyze this session. And the individual, it was a great session, but he made a statement that led me to thinking, and I came up with a really, really, really profound statement. And one of my children has the unique ability of stating the obvious and in a way that seemed profound to her. And we joked about this, and it's okay, wow, that's really a profound statement. It really is not a profound statement. Okay, well, what I'm about to tell you is a really profound statement. If I do nothing, nothing will be done. Say, okay, wow. I want my circumstances to change, but I'm not willing to do anything about them. If I do nothing, nothing is going to be done. I cannot expect to wave a magical wand over everything and it just get better. How many individuals want their life situation to improve, but they are unwilling to go do anything? Why is it that there are so many people holding cardboard signs, "Will work for food," in front of places that are hiring? Does that not strike you as a little odd? I don't want to go do anything. I just want this fixed. In fact, I can hold my sign. I'm not saying there aren't people with legitimate financial needs, not sure that they're the ones. I can hold my sign and actually create the burden on you. And I don't have to do anything. I've had various counseling sessions with individuals, and everything seemed to be going well until I brought out what their responsibility was. Typically, it comes in the form of what I'll call a homework assignment. And if I'm going to suggest, okay, well, here's what I'd like you to try to do this week, and come back next week and we'll chat some more, and you didn't do anything that I asked you to do, the session's going to be cut short. Because I can't fix something you're unwilling to address. And so while the statement, if I don't do anything, nothing will be done, might seem kind of like, okay, well, thank you, Captain Obvious. Think about its applications in our lives as it relates to our own spiritual life. I want these things I want this kind of a walk with the Lord. Okay? I think probably every one of us in here would say that you desire a certain walk with the Lord. You wouldn't be here if you didn't. Okay? And that's not to say that someone who isn't here doesn't. I'm not making that conclusion. But you desire that walk. Okay, now, if you never spend time in the Word of God, you're never going to get to that walk. If you don't pray, you're never going to get to that walk. So I can't just sit in my office and say, well, Lord, I just want a message from you, and never study. It would be nice. It would be very helpful on time. Okay? 5 minutes with God and I've got 4 messages. It does not work that way. But yet this is so many times how we approach our lives. Well, I want to be free of this. Then what are you doing to do so? How are you going to do that? What are the steps that you are going to take to implement that? And until you come to that point, you're going to struggle and stay defeated often. See, so I've seen your hair just a-blowing. There's so many ideas flowing in that mind. Go ahead.
The profound statement, you can sit in your recliner and say, boy, my grace really needs to be, I wish I could mow the grass. Yeah. And sit in the recliner, the problem is the recliner don't have a mower.
That's, the idea is the simple solution, my recliner needs a mowing deck. That's really what it needs. And so I can sit in my recliner and say, I need to cut the grass. Man, I need to get that grass. I just wish this grass would be cut. And we're going to have to go cut the grass. And I think in some ways there's a sense in which, well, I really want this, and I really want that, and I really want this change. I really want to grow up. Well, start making grown-up decisions. You're going to have to at some point in time. Life's going to smack you upside the head, and it's okay. We're going to have to put feet to our desires. Grant.
What you're saying also applies to nations, because the individual makes up nations. And I was reading Jeremiah, and Jeremiah was told by God, tell Israel this or they're going into captivity.
Yeah.
He told them, and they rejected, and God knew they rejected. He said, you're going into captivity.
Yeah, individuals make up nations, and Israel's a classic example of refusing to do what God had told them to do. And Jeremiah's one prophet, but how many prophets did God send that they rejected? And eventually God said, that's it. I've had it with that. Amy, you have a thought?
Also, it takes a level of discipline, and discipline comes in steps. If I want to lose 5 pounds, or if I have a bigger goal, you have to break it down into smaller, disciplined chunks. So change begins when we practice discipline, and the more discipline we practice, the more disciplined that our nature becomes. And so in my Christian walk, the more disciplined I become to understand who God is, then the more disciplined I should become in my prayer life, so that as I understand what He wants for me in His nature, then I'm going to practice prayer more. And the more that I practice it, the better I become at it. It's just like Bible reading. Well, I don't understand. The more I read my Bible, the better I get at being able to break it down. But if we never take the effort to start the discipline, then it's never going to come. And so I think there's a lot of people that, and myself included, there are things that we want, but we're unwilling to discipline our mind to focus on what I need to do to begin to accomplish that task? Because it comes in disciplined stages.
It does, and Amy points it out well, that much of what we desire comes by means of disciplined steps. I would encourage you, set goals that are attainable, okay? If you set a goal that is unattainable, you're defeated before you even start, okay? I mean, you might go and, you take a look around the house. There's probably projects around your house that are daunting, to say the least, okay? And it's like, you know what? Let's set a goal and say, all right, today I just want to accomplish just that. And strive to accomplish it. Now, sometimes that doesn't even happen. And, but strive to accomplish that. And but in order to get this, I'm going to have to take steps to try to achieve this. And until I do that, I can't just wave this magic wand and think that everything's just going to get better, just like that. Sarah?
Focused on the wrong one, too. It's not necessarily wrong, but maybe we have them out of order. And so sometimes we prioritize the thing that is kind of at the bottom of the list.
Yeah, we do. We focus on the wrong wants. May not necessarily be wrong in and of itself, but it may be in a wrong position, and so it's just achieved a wrong priority in our lives. And before long, we are kind of heading off in the wrong direction. It's a great point. Dale?
Sometimes you gotta, what I found out is that you just have to set your priorities of the day.
Yes. So,
And knock them off. If you can't knock them off, February, oops, you take over.
yeah, set your priorities of the day and do what you can to address those things.
He provides an escape. He tells you, well, he provides us an escape, but yet sometimes that escape is us moving.
It is, yeah. And I think sometimes we just want, it's almost like we want God to do everything and us to do nothing. There's this balance on this. And it is God who is at work in us, according to Philippians chapter 2, but we are also to be working out our salvation. Amen. I am crucified with Christ, nevertheless I live, yet not I, but Christ liveth in me. Okay, the works that I do through Christ. And so there's this fine balance between the two. It's not a let go and let God mindset that I think characterizes some. But at the same point in time, we have to set up our goals for the day and say, okay, well, what can we accomplish? Now, I'm going to be honest, I struggle with that, and I've gone all sorts of different levels on this, and I've tried to say, okay, well, from such and such a time until such and such a time, I'm going to work on this, and this time from this, I'll work on this. And it takes about an hour before the wheels of that day have already fallen off. And much of my responsibilities, and I think it would depend on kind of the nature of what you're trying to accomplish. If I'm trying to build a shed, for example, once the shed is built, the shed is built. That project can get a check mark done. Okay? For me, for example, I can get a message prepared. That message is coming right back another week. There is no check mark off per se. Now I can say, well, I checked off, Philippians for Sunday school. All right, that's done. But it's really not done per se. It's almost kind of like laundry. Okay, you got it done, and it's great. But you put a pair of clothes on, you're already starting the process all over again. And so it's almost like it never ends, almost. And wouldn't it be neat if you did laundry once, then you could wear it, and it would remain clean and washed and folded and put away? That would be amazing. It's not reality in that situation. And so I think sometimes the day-to-day grind of life is really what begins to wear on us quite a bit. Cecil?
Well, I think you've got to accept in mind also that sometimes you've got to stir up the mess, clean the mess. I'll use my garage, for example. It's been let go for a while, and I wanted to get in there and straighten it up. Well, when I get one section straightened up, I get in another section the section I just straightened up got messed up, moving stuff straight in.
Yeah.
But it's dwindled down to where, when I focus on it, it gets smaller and smaller and I can get accomplished. But you can get discouraged if you realize, I just worked on that, but now here it is, all messed up again.
Yeah. It does, and I think sometimes what you need to do is you just need to get more cabinets so that you can just shove it in a cabinet. And now, if it's out of sight, it's out of mind, and now it's cleaned, right? Bigger garage, that's what we need, This is sometimes our mindset. Well, I don't know what to do, so I'm just going to, cram it in this corner, in this closet, in this cabinet, in this drawer. How many homes have a junk drawer, all right? And then how many homes took a junk drawer that expanded to more than one junk drawer? It's just like everything that you don't know what to do with gets thrown in there. Before long, you've got things that don't work in there, batteries you can't find, razors that were in there, flashlights for when the power goes out, but when the power went out, you can't find it because it's in the junk drawer. All sorts of stuff goes on, all right? This is what we sometimes and how we oftentimes look at things. Amy, do you have a point?
Yeah, I think it's kind of like what is in the purpose of all of your planning, your agenda, what your process, what is your target? And I think as believers, our target is to glorify God and to become more like Him.
Right.
And so as I make my agenda, it's just kind of like sighting in a weapon. If I drop it and it gets all out of whack, I'm way off the target. And then I get on the target, but I'm shooting it way over to the very right corner. Okay, so I dial it in more, and now I'm over here on the left corner. But each time I'm shooting it, I'm dialing it in more and more and more and more and more onto the target. And I think that's the process by which we have to judge and what I accomplished in my agenda, my task, my focus. Lord, today did I bring it more to glorify you and be Christ-like in all that you gave me to do. So if there's no purpose to begin with, if there's no target, then you are going to flounder. But if you put your things on the target and balance them based on the glory and Christ-likeness that we as believers in all we do, whether it's laundry, which I dread, but it's always there. But how I focus on that target changes my perspective towards it.
It's excellent. Just come to the point where your mindset on what it is that you are to be doing. Glorify God. Does this glorify Him? Am I advancing the work today that God's called me to advance? And if so, then we have to, as Dale mentioned, leave it in God's hands. This was the end of it. All right, Lord, I couldn't do anything else today. And pillow our heads at night and realize we may live to fight another day. And then we wake up and think, I lived to fight another day. But anyway, and so here's the reality of sometimes where we're at. I was recently reading a section on prayer and dealing with that. And there were some interesting statements. And this was some of what he shared. He said, some people feel prayer is a form of magic. They feel that by praying, they will influence God to lift the problem and reverse the process. As one person said, I don't know about prayer and God. When I was sick the last time, I prayed and got better. But this time I prayed, and I'm not any better. Where is God? Now, this is, as the author goes on and points out, this is a limited view of prayer and God. Limited is probably an understatement. But then he made this statement. This was the one that really caught my attention. Prayer is not just a way to reverse difficulty, but a means of giving meaning to what is occurring in our lives. That was a pretty good statement. Prayer is not just a means to reverse difficulty, but a means of giving meaning to what is occurring in our lives. And sometimes, even in our prayer life, our questioning of God, and not in an improper way, I think it can be done properly, I think it can be done improperly, is a form of prayer. Lord, what are you doing? Why have you allowed this? And what we're looking to do is not reverse the difficulty, but use prayer instead as a means of giving meaning to what is occurring in our lives. But more often than not, when I pray, I want the difficulty reversed. And to be honest with you, I'd like it done now. I see no point in waiting. I see no value in dragging this out. In fact, I actually see a lot of problems with dragging this out. So let's not drag this out. Let's just solve it and let's be done and check this off and move on. Prayer is not just a way to reverse difficulty, but a means of giving meaning to what is occurring in our lives. An excellent point and an excellent perspective, I think, on the aspect of prayer. It's going to be this element that Paul is going to begin to develop in Philippians chapter 4. And while we eliminate anxiety, if we're going to experience the peace that is described in verse 7, which is the goal, you can't just eliminate anxiety without adding the discipline of prayer. And I would ask you, as we kind of wrap this session up, what's your prayer life like? How consistent are you? Is prayer your first option or your last resort? How much time do you spend in prayer? We will probably all say, I need to be better. But outside of thanking God for meals so that you don't choke, do you pray? Has there been anything from Wednesday night that we took during our prayer request time that you've prayed for the rest of the week? I think all of us in here would probably say, I need to do better in prayer. And maybe if we quit relying on ourselves, trying to wave that magic wand, and started praying more, we'd see God do more. Maybe if I do nothing, nothing will be done. Ye have not, because ye ask not. Thought many, many times, will there be a point in time when we get to heaven and see prayers God had answered that we never received because we just didn't ask? It's really quite a thought. Let's pray and we'll be dismissed. Thank you, Lord, for the day. Thank you for this opportunity today. And Lord, I thank you for the privilege to be able to study your word and be able to share its truths. Lord, I pray that today you would challenge us to be more devoted in our prayer life and strive to be what you would have us to be. And we pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. God bless. I'll see you back here in just